So today we're talking to Mike Westra, Trail Director for Evergreen Mountain Bike Alliance. And the purpose of this particular session is to help new mountain bikers learn a little bit more about how trails get built and how they're maintained. It's like who creates them and who works on them. And also, if you're an intermediate or advanced mountain biker and you don't know the answer to either of those, this is also for you. And with that, first thing I'll ask Mike is, can you tell me a little bit about your history with mountain biking overall?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Yeah, I've been mountain biking for a while, almost 20 years now, I'd say. I moved to the Northwest in 2002, and that's when I really started getting into it. Used to be a big climber. I was one of those riders that climbed. The downhill was the price you pay for the climb. As I got older, that all changed. Now it's obvious, the climb is the price you pay for the downhill. And I started getting involved with Evergreen back in about 2004, just joined a few work parties. But then I was laid off from high tech in 2005, and that's when I really dove in. Just after the I-5 Colonnade project started, I got laid off, and I just took the severance package and just dove in. After a couple of years at the Colonnade Park, I spent the severance package, had to start looking for another job, and then Evergreen came to me, or back then it was called the Backcountry Bicycle Trails Club, came to me and said, hey, we've got some money to pay you part-time to wrap up Colonnade, and there's this place you never heard of called Duthie Hill. We might get some money to pay you to go build some trails in there. So I stuck with it. Every year I thought was going to be my last. And every year it grew and grew and grew. To at one point we had 30 trail builders on our staff. So it's just been growing ever since. So there's the history.
What does it mean to be trails director?
That's a tough one because there's just way more happening than one person can do in a 60-hour work week. So I actually, I'm the trails director, but I also do a lot of project management, a lot of project development, just trying to get things together. I also look to our executive director, Yvonne Krause, to help with that trails director role. Because there's just so much going on across the state. But it's basically everything there is to do with trails, planting that first seed. Hey, this is a great landscape. There's hiking trails in here, but you've got nothing for mountain bikers. How do you get that conversation started with the land manager? And, how do you put those trails on the landscape? Where do they start? Where do they end? Where do they go? What do they connect to? Then actually going in on the ground and figuring out, tying ribbons to trees and actually aligning the trails, to building them and maintaining them in the long run. And so it's everything that has to do with those efforts. So we have project managers on our staff that run projects from start to finish. Crew chiefs on the staff that actually direct operations on the ground. So they decide what dirt goes where and what tool is going to be used to move that dirt, to put it in simple terms. And then we've got trail builders, from excavator operators, hand builders, chainsaw masters, mechanics. We need a lot of mechanical skills, so we've got great mechanics on our staff. To maintenance, we have a guy who manages our trail maintenance program statewide, and all the grant funding and other sources of funding that we get to fund trail maintenance on over 1,000 miles of trail in the state.
That's a pretty expansive job, and you started answering some of the other questions I wanted to ask too. And one of those was, what does it take to build a trail? And you gave a really quick high level, but let's go a little deeper on that. What does it actually take? I know that we're going to talk with Vaughn later, and there's advocacy and everything else that goes on, working with the land manager and all that. But from your perspective and what you work on, what does it take to build a trail?
Once we've been given the green light, like, hey, yeah, we want trails here. We've got the funding, or we're going to get the funding. What do we do? We have a 4-hour trail school that we teach that just scratches the surface of that topic.
Wow.
So I break it down into kind of 4 stages: planning, design, construction, and maintenance. And they all overlap, and they don't start and stop and then move to the next phase. They all overlap, but I like to define them as if they were individual stages. And planning is all about getting a high level concept of what you want these trails to accomplish and roughly where you want them to go and who they're going to serve. And then design is actually flagging them on the ground, creating a trail map and a trail plan and a budget and a schedule and a scope and a contract and all that stuff. And then construction is actually starting to build them. Now, in each one of them, I mean, I could do a week-long seminar on planning. I could do a week-long seminar on design. I could do a week-long seminar on construction. They have whole trail symposiums every year that are a week long, and every year they have another one just talking about construction. So it's hard to say. I would say if you're really interested in learning what's going on, join one of our trail schools. Unfortunately, during times of COVID, those are tough to do. We're still wondering if maybe we should invest the time and do it in some kind of a Zoom meeting or podcast. We're still looking into that.
What are some of the key differences between the trails that somebody who's gone through all the training that you're talking about build and like those master trail builders build? And if I just took a shovel out there and I just like, hey, this is a good place for a trail, and I just started digging, like, what are some of the key differences between those two?
Several things. I think one of the biggest ones is that a professional trail builder, somebody who does this for a living, really strives to, they're doing it for someone else. They're not doing it for themselves. They're really thinking about other riders' experience on the trail and then planning, designing, and building according to that, versus just starting at the top of the mountain, looking down between the trees and going, oh yeah, that looks really fun, I'm going to go there, and just start digging. Or, oh, then I'm going to run into something that looks really tough to get through, so I'm going to have it just make a sharp turn and go over here because that looks a lot easier to build. I mean, that's typically, when I was a road builder back in the day, that's how I did it. It's just, hey, here's the top, there's the bottom. What's the easiest and most fun way to get down there is kind of the natural way to do that. As you become more engaged with land managers and projects, and you see trails evolve over the history and develop into a system, you see some sustainability issues develop, and not just environmentally sustainable issues like erosion, but you see user conflicts, so social sustainability. You see yourself having to invest a lot of time in it, so financial sustainability. You start to think about all these things, and then just really thinking about the long term. And it's not just the short term easiest way down the mountain, but it's going to be what's the best way in the long run to do it. And you think about, who is this trail serving? This may be the most fun way for me, but that's not necessarily the most fun way for everybody. In fact, it might be impossible for a lot of newer riders.
Trail signage and designating trails and their difficulty ratings and that sort of stuff. What would you advise somebody who's just getting into mountain biking on how to read the signs and how to figure out the difficulty ratings?
It's not easy. I would first set expectations that, hey, you're going to go to a trail expecting one thing, and you're going to get something totally different at some point in your riding life. You're going to get to a trail thinking, oh, this is going to be a blast, and you're going to have to walk down most of it and be kind of disappointed. And sometimes you're going to go expecting, wow, this is going to be super fun, and you're going to get to the bottom and go, that was nothing. That wasn't a black diamond. That's a Whistler green. This is going to happen because it's really difficult. You look at a place like Duthie's cross-country trails, you want to offer progression. So you want to rate the trails so that riders who go to Duthie can progress from green to blue to black diamond. But you've only got so much terrain to work with. You're only taking progression from like absolute beginner to this high. So what do you have? Green, darker green, light blue, medium blue, dark blue? No. So you say, well, at Duthie, we've got green, blue, and black diamond level cross-country trail. Turns out that black diamond cross-country trail at Duthie isn't even as difficult as a blue in Darrington, because now Darrington, we've got an entire mountain, like 3,200 feet of vert and lots of rocks and cliffs and steep terrain from the top to the bottom. So it really, from the skills park at the bottom of Darrington to the Double Diamond Trail at the top, I mean, you've just got a massive difference in potential ways to design trails for different skill levels. So now you've got green, blue, black diamond, and double black diamond. So you can't count on a green, blue, black, double black trail system to tell you everything about the trail. I mean, I've traveled all across the US and BC, from BC coast to eastern BC, and even their trail rating system just varies drastically. Like Pemberton, Whistler, Squamish, just hop over to the islands, to Hornby Island, and Hornby Island system is more like Duthie's. You go head east to a place like Vernon, and there are systems where it's like, whoa, this is a blue, this is a double black, by us. And then you go to the next system over, and it's like, whoa, this was obviously designed to be much more family oriented, because the black diamond is almost green, and that's in BC. So I'm not making excuses for poor rating systems. Just there are challenges, and just don't expect it to be the end all answer.
And one of the key takeaways in that too is terrain makes a huge difference, right? So like depending on what you're working with, that's going to make a significant difference in the ratings. Another one too I've noticed is like there's a ton of trail associations out there. There's a ton of people designating ratings. There's not like one standards body for trail ratings or anything like that. And even in the Northwest, Evergreen obviously has a huge footprint, but there's dozens of trail associations out there and organizations out there building trails and marking them as they see fit. And so that's probably something else to keep in mind when people are trying to find those trails and see how they compare, because you can get an app like Trail Forks and you can compare them pretty easily. Like, oh, this one's got 22 blues, and it's like, yeah, but it doesn't really relate to the blues over here.
Another really good point is if it's a flow trail or a jump trail, I look at a trail like A-Line at Whistler. Any beginner could roll 90% of that. I mean, you could almost get down with a Strider bike. But it's a black diamond because its purpose is high speed, big tabletop jumps. So even though it's rollable, it's still a black diamond, because if you're going to clear the jumps, you have to have good bike handling skills, cornering skills, and jumping. Join the community somehow, whatever works best for you. If you hate social media, find a different way to join the community. Do a meetup and do rides with riders you don't know. Try to get involved with different riders so you're not always seeing the same riders. Join shop rides. Go to the trail and just hang out, and you'd be blown away by how many riders will want to go ride with you. And just kind of learn about systems. If you are okay with social media, jump on social media, join the Duthie page, join the Tiger page, and start asking questions. You'll learn that there's a lot of different personalities on those pages, but you will get valuable information. Like it's a valuable tool. It's a tool that gets abused like every tool, but you can use it to your advantage.
Evergreen's big in Washington State and has a pretty good footprint, and there's a lot of other organizations. But overall, how many hours are put in by Evergreen employees, people that are paid by Evergreen? How many hours are put in by them?
It depends from year to year, depends on the seasons. This has been a particularly challenging year because of COVID. We have people laid off for quite a while and then coming back online. But I would say typically 20 full-time staff per year. So what does that work out to? About 40,000 hours of trail building, not just of trail work. And I would say from the staff, that's about maybe 75, 25, 70, 30 new construction to maintenance. The staff does a lot more construction than maintenance. If you look at volunteer hours, we logged about 28,000 hours last year. So if you think about all the ones we're missing, that's 30, 35, maybe 40,000 volunteer hours as well. So the same amount of time in the dirt as professional staff working full time. But for the volunteer hours, I'd swap that a bit. It's a little more maintenance than new construction, maybe more like 60-40.
I saw something recently where some people had gone up to a trail and they had done a bunch of brushing, right? They trimmed back the foliage and everything that was growing over the trail. And somebody from Evergreen actually reached out and said, hey, can you send us the hours, how many hours did you, and give us your email address? Because there was a reason that Evergreen wanted to log that volunteer. Can you tell us why that's important?
Yeah, that's super important. Number one, because we get grant funding based on the community contribution, or what they call sweat equity. Like, hey, grantor, for every dollar we get from you, we're going to generate $5 of value with volunteer contribution or materials donation or equipment donation. So everything volunteers provide for Evergreen, not just trail work, but helping with our trail schools, helping with our instructor program and teaching kids in dirt camps, helping at events. All that really helps us get more grant funding. But so that's the number one, like, measurable benefit. But the biggest benefit comes from building community. I like to, I don't know how to put it, but one of the best ways I think about it is this: if we had put a fence around Duthie and then gone in with a professional staff, built everything exactly the way it is today, used rotting alder in some of the rollers, and then it was all done professionally, and then we took the fence down and opened it up to the community, I think we would have got a lukewarm response. It would have picked up over time, but it would have been a totally different response. But by completely engaging the community in every single thing that happened at Duthie, the good and the bad, it brought in so much love and feeling of community and ownership and stewardship. It just means so much more to so many riders as they're riding. Oh, I helped build that berm, or hey, I spent the entire day tearing rotting alder out of that tabletop and rebuilding it with good dirt. That kind of thing really just develops a sense of community that makes people kind of loyal to the cause and want to keep it alive, keep it maintained. So that's a huge benefit.
Shifting gears a little bit now and talking about maintenance. One of the questions I see asked a lot: what about riding trails in the wet, in the rain, in the wet months? What's your advice to new riders about that?
Totally depends on the soil and where you are. So I'll focus on Western Washington. And generally there is no rule. It's, hey, we really want to build trails that you can ride all year round. It rains all winter here, so they're going to be wet all winter. So we want to build them so that they can be ridden all winter. And most of them that applies, but there are a few exceptions. So it really boils down to, what are your tires doing to the trail? If you're doing one ride and you're leaving a measurable, noticeable impact by a rut through mud or a lot of mud, then really rethink riding that trail until it dries out a little bit. And that happens when there's a lot of clay in the soil, or when there's a freeze-thaw situation going on. At night, it's cooling down, and you're getting some kind of freezing on top. And then during the day, when it warms up, that's all melting, and then you're wicking moisture up from underneath. And in any kind of a clay environment, that's going to turn nasty really fast. So just kind of general rule, it's okay to ride, but just watch out for what you're doing to the trail. Take note, and if you're leaving a rut, maybe keep off that one wet. And then another exception is after really big storms, always better to stay away for a couple of days, because after a storm, if you start riding right away, all that debris that falls down in the storm, if you just start grinding that into the mud, then it's a much bigger effort to clean it up afterwards than if we've been able to send a bunch of work parties through to clean all that stuff up and then let the tires have at it. Having said that, that's just Western Washington. And some places are much better in the wet than others. Like, for example, Tokel, great place in the wet, really sandy, gravelly soils. It's better in the wet. It's actually bad in the dry. You want to stay away when it's too dry. But there are places in eastern Washington with heavy clay soils or clay sand loam that just keep out entirely after a rain. Lots of places down south, California, Nevada, Utah, just totally stay off the trails when it's wet. But our sandy loam soils that dominate the west side of the Cascades just make it a great place to ride in the wet overall.
Which is good because that's like 8 months out of the year.
Right.
If a trail seems like it needs work, what should I do?
I mean, number one, join your local mountain bike organization, join Evergreen. That's the most important thing. Then if you can, if you've got the time, contribute somehow. Sign up for a work party and learn the process. Find a maintenance work party that's going to deal with the kind of problems you're seeing and join a work party and learn. There are definitely some things that just any rider can do that are super easy. And that's if you're riding a trail and something's slapping you in the face or slapping your hands, even just once or twice on each ride, when it's time to take a break, throw down your bike, pull some loppers out of your pack, and just go lop that stuff all the way back to the trunk of the tree that it's coming from, or back to the stem of the bush that it's coming from, and just brush all that stuff back, clean that stuff off of the trail. That has a huge impact. If there's any storm blowdown and you can get it with a pruning saw or drag it off the trail, by all means, do that. The next thing you could learn how to do is clearing drains in the fall. And there are videos online that'll show you how to do that with your front tire or with your foot. And every little bit helps. Or join a trail school. It's 4 hours of kind of interactive classroom session in the morning, and then we go out on a trail and actually build a trail.
What sort of issues result in extra maintenance?
Shortcutting turns, creating your own lines in the woods. This creates a lot of work. I would say the number one is probably, so flow trails and jump trails are much higher maintenance than technical, natural, gnarly trails. And skidding into berms and hard braking into berms is probably the number one source of maintenance manpower required. Yeah, I'd say overall that's it. And so it's just a matter of keeping your speed under control so you're not hard braking in the berms, so you're coming into the turn off the brakes. You can get through the berm at a speed that's comfortable for you at your skill level. That would help immensely. But it's going to happen. As trail builders, we know berms are going to get shredded, and we just got to go back in and fix them. I mean, look at Whistler. They will close down a line or crank it up, completely rebuild every lip and every berm so that when they open it up, it's just magic. By that afternoon, it's got giant holes in every berm. It's just what happens. I mean, I would say really don't worry so much about the damage you're doing to the trail. I mean, try your best. But I think a much better way to look at it would be like, have fun and then join the community and help fix it back up.
Yeah, so that kind of leads into my next question. What are the type of things that pull you and your crew away from either building new trails or maintaining trails?
That's a really good question. And I would say the number one thing is pirate trails. When a land manager finds a pirate trail and wants it gone, that generates a lot of work for us. Typically, what the land manager likes us to do is to find the builders, engage the builders, go on site, tear everything out, do all the restoration, transplanting to try to restore the site back the way it was, and then show the land manager that the builders are willing to work with Evergreen and actually do maintenance on legit trails. That's kind of the ideal thing that a land manager wants us to do. And that's happened multiple times. Usually it's kids finding some woods behind their house and building some jumps in it. And then it's never like, oh, we're going to call the cops, we're going to find you, we're going to call the sheriff. No, it's, King County anyway has been very positive and proactive and understanding about it. And it's like, yeah, we just engage the kids, decommission it, have a little talk, bring them to Duthie, get them engaged in some legitimate work. And we've been able to do that quite a few times. And that's great. The land manager knows they're not going to be able to stop it in some cases, so they just let it happen and hope that it stays under control and doesn't go out of control. And as long as it doesn't go out of control, they'll turn a blind eye to it. So number one is pirate trails. Number two is social media. Don't get me wrong, social media is a really valuable tool. It allows us to really communicate, spread the word, understand our community. But like any tool, it can be abused. And sometimes I have to go back into the same thread like 3 times to set the record straight. It's gone off on some false narrative or whatever it is, and I have to come back and say, no, here's the real story. Nope, here's the real story. And sometimes you got to watch it for weeks, just so false information isn't spread and you correct it. So that takes a lot of time. But I mean, if I look at all the time I've spent on Facebook or Instagram, I mean, overall, it's been an extremely valuable tool. I learn a lot from the community. I'm able to communicate a lot to the community, and I'm able to deal with the trolls. Honestly, when someone starts trolling and bringing negativity or false information into a thread, it's actually a good opportunity to like educate, set the record straight. When someone comes in and starts bashing Evergreen, sometimes the original poster's tendency is to just delete the thread. And I'm like, no, this is an awesome opportunity to come in and talk about what they just said and educate and, set the record straight. And not everybody's going to like everything Evergreen's doing all the time. So deal with it. So anyway, that takes a lot of time. Another one, we have made a lot of progress over the last 10 years getting new trails, but we still have a lot of enemies. We have a lot of people that just don't like mountain bikers. They don't like mountain biking trails. They don't think mountain bikes should be in natural areas or in our state forests. A lot of competing user groups that see mountain bikes as a threat to their usage of the trail because mountain biking is growing so fast. So it takes a lot of time dealing with these folks, and especially when they start to get nasty. One example is where another user lodged a formal complaint that we were actually violating the permit for some trails that we built. And that was a year-long, hundreds of hours of staff time, hundreds of hours of volunteer time, just trying to sort that whole situation out and deal with that. I mean, that in a cost of tens of thousands of dollars to deal with that. Oh, and last, e-bikes. Huge, huge time sink. And but the thing is, it's a really important conversation. They're here to stay. We need to be working faster on places for e-bikes to ride. We're working on it. It's just the conversations deteriorate in such a way that creates such a time sink and such an emotional, drain that that's also been a huge distraction. We're working on it.
Wow, yeah, that's a pretty long list of distractions there. I feel for you on some of those because at the end of the day, you're also kind of trying to come to a resolution, whereas a lot of other people can just pipe in and say their piece and walk away. Yeah. If you could have a conversation with each new mountain biker, what would you say to them?
That's a tough question. Just like, I don't know, welcome, have fun. This is an amazing sport. Everybody gets something different out of it. Um, just be a part of the community. I mean, I know a lot of riders are going to start doing this for solitude because they want to get on their bike and ride off into the woods alone and they don't want to have to deal with anyone. But I think for most riders, they'll get more out of it if they join the community and participate and contribute and be a part of it. So it's like join your local organization, join rides, meet new people, understand different riders' perspectives, understand different users' perspectives. Try to understand how mountain bikers fit in the overall picture of all of these different user groups competing for more resource. Also, that trails don't build themselves. Tax dollars don't fund trails, really. It's more grant funding and sweat equity and fundraising and volunteer contribution that builds trails. So you can afford it, be a part of it.
I remember when I first was getting into mountain biking, some friends took me to a trail and we just rode it. And I didn't have a clue who owned the property. I had no idea. There were no signs or anything else. We just went there and we rode the trails. I had no idea who built the trails. Had no idea who maintained the trails. I think I had this idea that they kind of maintain themselves because you ride over it, you keep kind of clearing the path. And so I just had no idea. And even if I went to, trails that were on a state park or something like that, I just assumed it was like the state or the whatever government agency, was in charge of that land, that they were the ones that had employees that took care of the trails and did the work and everything else. And so it was all of that. And there wasn't really anything else I needed to do. And the truth of the matter is, it's not even close to being the way it works.
Right. Oh, I had a very similar experience. I remember when I first started mountain biking, I just addicted right away. And I just started finding all the trails I could ride. I was actually living in Chicago, and I went to my first mountain biking exposition or some kind of get together. And I was like, oh, cool. I'm going to go check out all the mountain bike vendors and talk to everybody. And I remember going to this was in Chicago, actually. And I going to the local Chicago mountain biking advocacy group at the time. I didn't even know they exist. I'm like, oh, wow, you're kind of representing mountain bikers. And I started telling them about all the trails I love. And then I remember them telling me oh, yeah, unfortunately, we're getting booted out of there. We're going to have to close those trails because of this and because of that. And so my gut reaction was, oh, my God, this nonprofit is the enemy. They're shutting down all the trails that I love. That was my first reaction. And it took, and it's like, well, I'm going to go ride them and build them anyway. But it took a while for me to understand just all of the effort that goes behind it, all of the competing resources for that nature preserve in the middle of Chicago, and and then the environmental concerns and all these things. It took a long time for me to understand that and really understand how valuable that nonprofit, that community organization is. And
do you have any additional thoughts or words of trail wisdom you'd like to share?
Yes, one thing that I think is really important for mountain bikers to understand is that not everybody experiences the trail in exactly the same way. We all look for different things and experience things differently. I like to say that one rider's jank is another rider's awesome, and one rider's awesome is another rider's what? It's so don't expect everybody to enjoy the trails the same way as you. Just have fun.